contract so much, whether it's on Wall Street or whether it's in Nazi Germany?
I would talk about sin as well. I mean, the vocabulary of sin, though it finds its natural home in religion, isn't limited. I mean, we need a vocabulary to talk about. We need to face the fact that people are not perfectly moral. And it's no doubt some deep truth about our nature that we fail to live up to our moral obligations. You can put this fact in some metaphysical terms in terms of original sin. You can put this fact in naturalistic terms in terms of something about our evolutionary heritage and how we were evolved to favor our kin and our friends. There's going to be some explanation of it. Anybody who pretends that everything is well with the world is naive. The claim that there's objective morality is not, and that perfectly rational beings would agree to its terms and thereby ground or be from the basis of objective reality, is not any kind of claim that we are perfectly rational, that we behave perfectly rationally. In trivial terms, this is a completely familiar fact. You're on a diet, and the piece of chocolate cake calls you from the refrigerator, right? So you know you shouldn't do it. You do it anyway. That's what people are like. Interesting question why that's so, but I take it there's no disagreement at all that it's so. And the naturalist, I think, is no more at a handicap in terms of offering explanations of that fact.
What about ways of preventing it? Do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, are there ways of controlling? It's sort of instilling the social contract a little bit better.
Well, look, there are a variety of things that people need in order to become moral beings. One is moral education, a topic of tremendous significance, though, again, other than just gesturing its direction, it would take us way too long to say anything helpful about it. How children are brought up so as to have a regard for one another and to recognize that it isn't just a matter of whether you get caught. It isn't just a matter of whether you're going to get punished, but that this is another human being you're dealing with, and as such, you have to have respect for their interests. Moral education is crucially important. Moral community is crucially important. And not to be naive at all, the state is crucially important. I mean, there's certainly one thing that Craig's theism provides him that I lack. He has a cosmic enforcer, which provides a kind of motivation that I can't appeal to. So I've got to hope I can assemble materials here on Earth. Although I can't resist taking one little, I'm not sure if it's a pot shot, but at least it's a question about the accountability, which I take it as the thought that evildoers get punished and good doers get a heavenly reward, and so you don't get the bad guys getting into heaven. I'm not quite sure how to reconcile that with the belief that Jesus can provide, salvation. Yeah. It seems to me that is in tension with the notion of accountability we're trying to put forward.
Yeah, actually, this gets into really important questions of theology, because on the Christian view, it isn't the bad guys that go to hell. The bad guys get into heaven. The bad guys are the ones who recognize their sin, who turn to God in contrition and repentance and say, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. It's the self-righteous Pharisees who wind up in hell because they fancy they're so good they don't need God's forgiveness and cleansing. So on the Christian view, Christ actually is the one who bears the penalty and the payment for sin. The wrath of God from God's holy justice is poured out upon Christ so that I don't have to pay the penalty for my sins that I deserve, and I can be a beneficiary of His grace.
But that does seem then in tension with the notion of accountability that you were laying forward, where the thought was, unless my doing good has cosmic significance, if it turns out that I can do evil, and as long as I manage to recognize the saving power of Jesus, in time, this accountability stuff's not really there.
Well, I mean, no genuine Christian would think like that. What I was trying to communicate there, is that our moral lives really matter, that they make a difference. For me, the thought that everything perishes in the heat death of the universe, like Russell's credo, is so depressing, so awful that it just seems to put a question mark behind everything we do. All our accomplishments, all our deeds just seem so trivial in light of this cosmic doom that awaits us all.
But not for me.
Yeah.
It seems to me. It seems to me that
I just don't understand.
If I've saved somebody's life, I've done something significant. I've done something important. I've done something whose significance is not in any way threatened, diminished, reduced one iota by the fact that whatever it is, 40 billion years from now, the sun will explode. It's neither here nor there. I've saved a human life. That's what matters. And the fact it doesn't have cosmic significance doesn't seem to me to undermine its significance.
I'd like to talk about animals.
Animals.
Yes. What about our relationship with animals? Do we have a moral obligation to treat animals well, or are they just totally separate from us in the grand scheme of things?
Now, is that a question for me?
It's for both of you.
You want to go first?
Yeah. Well, I think that here the Christian, the theist, has a tremendous advantage in terms of developing an environmental ethic and an ethic for the stewardship and care of animals. And it would be based not upon the fact that animals themselves are moral agents who have rights, because, as we've said, not being rational beings, they aren't moral agents. So it's not as though the antelope has the right to live or something of that sort. But rather, on a Christian view, God has given us stewardship of this beautiful planet to care for it and not to pollute it and ravage it and destroy it. And so I think we have responsibilities toward the animals that would involve not just slaughtering them aimlessly, polluting the seas and destroying their environments and so forth, but that we would be like gardeners, in a sense, tending a garden in which there are not only vegetable life, but also there would be animal life as well. So I would see this as rooted in the divine responsibilities and mandates given to us to be good stewards of the earth.
Are you a vegetarian?
No, I'm not.
So our stewardship towards animals only goes so far.
Right.
We can eat them. We can chop them up and wear them.
Yes. But that would be done in ways that would be, I think, compatible with certain kinds of rules.
No. So I'm not sure you get the advantage, as you put it, in that case. So,
well, but I mean, on naturalism, what can the naturalist say in the struggle for survival of the fittest? How is there any kind of ethic toward behavior toward animals?
My view wasn't survival of the fittest. My view was that what morality boils down to is don't harm and do help. And now the question is, can creatures like chickens and cows be harmed? And the answer is, of course they can. Consequently, I think it's immoral to harm them. And that seems to me to provide a very strong moral reason to be a vegetarian, to not wear leather, and the like. So I certainly will concede that your view allows for a space for a certain kind of limited responsibility towards the animals, but I beg to differ with the claim that you've got a better handle on that situation than I do. It seems to me that our treatment of animals is morally appalling. It's morally completely unacceptable, and that we ought to radically revise the way we live precisely because they feel pain, they can be hurt, and we're constantly hurting these creatures.
Let's talk about the difference between various societies. How do we explain differences in culture, the treatment of women, the treatment of different races, genders, sexualities in various societies, if there is a single God with a single morality, or if there is a social contract standard?
Now here I don't think there would be any significant difference between us, in the sense that this is a question about moral epistemology, that is to say how we come to a knowledge of the good and the right, rather than a question of moral ontology, which is a question about the objective reality of the good and the right. And I think we would both agree that the objective existence of moral values and duties doesn't imply that these are always easy to grasp, or that people infallibly do grasp them, given our human proclivity to selfishness and
So certain
sinfulness.
societies haven't caught up.
Yeah, I have absolutely no qualms about being politically incorrect and saying that certain societies like National Socialist Germany were morally corrupt. Or Afrikaner South Africa, or...
What about Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, in its treatment of women, I think it's appalling. I think that once you have a transcendent moral standard that transcends culture and society, you're in a position to make the kind of judgments that the court did at Nuremberg in saying that these Nazi leaders were war criminals and were justly condemned for what they did. If you lack that transcendent standard, then I think you are faced with the problem of sociocultural relativism.
Well, as Craig says, this is, I think, actually a point in which we are in large agreement. I might not use the word transcendent here, but I think I agree otherwise with virtually everything he said. So if the question is, what's the explanation of the fact that so many societies have had morally appalling moral codes, the answer in part is it takes a while for civilization to work its way up to recognize moral truth, just as it takes a while for civilization to work its way up to recognize truths in any other domain. So I believe in evolution. I believe for familiar, I was making a remark like this over dinner, that for familiar evolutionary reasons, we were built to think the world moved along roughly Aristotelian lines with regard to physics. It's bad physics, but it's understandable why evolution would select us to think that something like Aristotelian physics was so. Happily, evolution also implanted in us reasoning capacity to step back from the beliefs that it gave us at the ground level and to challenge them and to test them. And so we've worked our way up from Aristotelian physics, and similarly, it takes centuries to work our way up to the point at which we recognize that all people are equal. It takes centuries until we work our way up to the point at which we recognize that women count as much as men, blacks count as much as whites, and that animals count too.
On that note, very nice. We'd like you to give some closing statements, just a few words.
Wow.
To the students.
Who's going to go first?
Who goes first?
Who went first?
I went first.
Why don't you go first this time?
Okay. I didn't prepare a closing statement, so this is just, I'm going to just wing it. I've argued tonight that if God exists, then you do have an objective basis for moral values, moral duties, and moral accountability. And I don't think that that's ever been disputed tonight. The debate has been more about whether naturalism can give you these things, but we haven't really contested that if God exists, then you will have a sound foundation for morality. God's own holy and just nature will be the good and will define the good as all things relate to it. His commandments to love him and to love our neighbor as ourselves will furnish grounds for our moral duties and obligations that will be objective and transcultural. And then our lives will have a paramount significance because the moral choices we make really do make a difference. They have eternal consequences. So I think theism is tremendously attractive and would invite you to consider it for yourselves. By contrast, on naturalism, it's hard to see why these creatures we call Homo sapiens have intrinsic moral value. This moral contract seems to me to be just a fiction and not really anything more than a social convention that Homo sapiens conspire among themselves to fancy themselves valuable. And this is especially evident, I think, on materialism and determinism, where, as I say, making a moral decision is no different than a tree growing a branch. It's hard to see how a puppet and its movements can have moral significance. In terms of moral duties, again, without someone to prohibit something or to command something, it's very hard to see how things can be prohibited or commanded. That's very different than the law of contradiction, I think, because the law of contradiction doesn't prescribe behavior. It doesn't say to you, don't contradict yourself. You're free to do that if you want to. It just says if you do so, you're irrational. But the moral duties are giving you prescriptions for behavior, for ways you ought to behave. And it seems to me on atheism that they are just like rules of etiquette. And then finally, moral accountability. I've already talked about that it's hard to see why we should always adopt the moral point of view rather than just act in our own self-interest on atheism, since it really doesn't make any difference in the long run. So I would just invite you as students to think deeply about whether or not theism isn't the better foundation for building your own moral life and a career that lies ahead of you.
Well, let me start on a note of agreement. I would want to invite all of you to think as well. I don't think the issues that we've been talking about this evening are at all easy or simple. I suppose it's probably obvious that we haven't settled anything here, but it's important to also point out that we've only begun to address any number of relevant issues. This is not the kind of topic that you can do justice to in an hour and a half. At best, it can whet your appetite for learning more. So on the one hand, I want to encourage all of you who haven't taken a class in moral philosophy to take a class in moral philosophy and see how some of the great minds through history of Western civilization have dealt with some of these issues. And similarly, I would encourage all of you, theists or not, take classes in religion. I hope I've said nothing this evening to suggest any kind of hostility to religion. Far from it. I think it's a view worth taking very, very seriously. Though I happen to believe that theistic beliefs don't play any essential role in grounding morality. Now, I sketched a view according to which there is morality, it's an objective fact in as robust a sense as it seems to me one might like. That morality is real and genuine, and I tried to lay out at least the rough outline of how that view might go. It seems to me that one essential point of disagreement between Craig and me is something that I asked about several times. It's this move, what to my mind is the move from the thought that without theism, then our actions don't have eternal cosmic significance, to the conclusion that, therefore, without theism, our actions don't have significance, objective, moral significance. That just seems to me to be a mistake. It seems to me that if I love somebody, the reality of that loving relationship is valuable, of real value, of genuine, objective value, and it's not in any way threatened by the fact that I will die, my wife will die, my children will die, and eventually the universe will come to an end. The fact that billions and billions of years from now it's all going to be the same doesn't mean it's all the same now. I certainly want to concede that if you're looking for this kind of cosmic significance, atheism's not going to provide it for you. But that wasn't the subject of tonight's debate. The subject of tonight's debate was whether you needed that kind of cosmic significance to have morality. And on that issue, I'm quite confident the answer is no. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
For more information about the Veritas Forum, including additional recordings and a calendar of upcoming events, please visit our website at veritas.org.